Hello there, here is my opinion about this new patch. Um, Most of these buffs are useless. What do I even mean by that? Arnau returns to Draven if he's dead. Now, this is useful in some case scenario, but if Draven is really ahead, in lane, likely he won't die. In some case scenario, it is useful. I won't say it's completely useless, but if you're ahead as you should be, generally speaking, if you don't really die too often, this won't be too useful. It's nice to have it sometimes, but it's not the most useful buff for Draven. Um, on the other hand, passive damage from movement speed is flat 30, which means she has a bit more early damage and later on she's gonna have 5% less, while notably the W cooldown gonna be 1 second less, and our cooldown again notably gonna be smaller, so they're buffing a bit Janna's damage and her ult frequency. Now these buffs matter a bit more because she has way more pressure early on then, right? And her ult is a bit more frequent, so this buff actually does matter. Now the Q ribbon buff, again, can't complain, super good changes, right? Uh, so what does this allow ribbon to even do? The flat damage values didn't get changed at all, but the important thing you should watch out for, she got 5% early on and 5% later on. What does that even mean? Well, also notably, before I say anything, our bonus AD went up from 20% to 25%, which means that at the end of the day, she will get more AD from her ult, which means her Q will get even more damage value, right? Because it's scaling gone up. While also notably, Ribbon goes for AD items and Conqueror. This will generally means that her early game short trades or more so all-ins will be a bit more potent, because ideally you need to hit all 3 of your Qs to get the most value out of that 5% bonus damage, while her all-in will be a bit notably better. So I think Darius players will maybe suffer a little bit from this change, or generally speaking tanks in some case scenario. Her extended fights will get, she will get more value out of extended fights basically, right? Okay, now let's go down to Trundle. They buffed his AD growth by 1, which means at level 10 you have 10 more AD, which is a longsword. Trundle is already sort of a stat checker champ, and he also gets like mana, right? So his Q costs 10 less mana. Generally speaking, Trundle is played in the jungle, so this is not too useful. This Q mana buff is more so for top lane, but on top lane you don't have actually too many mana issues. It's like it's helpful, and definitely you can get more Qs up with this mana buff, but I'm not sure if this is it, because Trundle suffers from some other issues. Like Trundle's issue is not necessarily his damage. Right now, sure, maybe it feels like he's lacking some degree of damage, but his bigger issues are not necessarily his damage. That's what I'm gonna point out. The issue with Trundle is not necessarily his damage, but I think this will be a decent like solo Q buff, more so than pro play. Now Vel'Koz is passive. It's a bit of a lazy buff. They buff the flat values and they also buff the percentage value by 10%. This generally means that if you can get at least like 2 passive procs in an all-in, it's easier to find lethal damage with your ultimate, which is definitely useful. I would say this is completely useless, but Azap himself said it that don't add a percentage or a flat damage buff. What Riot Games needs to do is to do some type of adjustment with Vel'Koz's abilities. I even talked to him personally in his Twitch chat. I texted him, and I talked about it would be nicer if Vel'Koz gets a movement speed buff, and he agreed with me. A 15, 10, 20% speed buff on his Q projectile would be nice, just to match the mobility that already exists in the game. But he already said that these changes are a bit bullshit. The same way as like the Trundle changes, like they are a bit useful. I don't say they are useless, but this doesn't fix the issues Trundle already has, you know. Okay, whatever, let's move on. Briar, base health, like these are very like soft changes in my opinion. These are very soft buffs, and these days Riot really tries to be careful, but at the same time they often like just gave some worthless copium buffs. So I get it that they're trying to be careful and maybe just like later on give a hot fix or just like buff them later on. They slowly like to stack up smaller buffs instead of hard buffing something, but this is not it. These are not much things. These are like very little things. Um, in my opinion. No, Brian. Base health nerfed by 20. I mean, she's power played in the jungle. This will affect her laning a little bit, but she anyways gonna be level 4-5 by the time she fights, so a little bit it does matter, but these like base HP nerfs are like weird, honestly. W missing health damage is gonna be also lower, but that's the thing, like Briar is only useful when she's fed, and I think the Briar is already overly nerfed. I don't know, honestly. Riot Games should nerf Briar this health because it's not very useful usually in pro play, and she's only strong when she's fed. I don't know. Cassante, in every way, this is worth. So of course they caused him to have some degree of mana issues. They nerfed his scaling damage by 20 later on in the game. Then of course X-Flash bug fixed. E-Shield will have more flat damage values but less percentage scaling, which means in long term he will provide less shielding. Then the good thing is that I'm not sure if this is bugged, but I think they added even in its League of Legends patch they made a typo because SpiderX made a typo. He typed in his chat that he did a typo. Then people are everywhere they're typing it scales with levels and not with like level 6 then with every like point you put in your ultimate, but apparently if this is true then this is not a big nerf. Our bonus damage AD is actually a bit lower as well, but if this is true it's not a big nerf. This is from 6 to 18, I think. I think like that's what one of the rioters said, but in here it's written by levels, and that's what I found on BBB, that's what I found on SpiderX's Twitter, but he said he corrected it, but everywhere I see the same typing mistakes, so this should be a nerf, but it might end up to be a buff. The same thing about his E, it's kinda weird that the flat values are buffed, but somehow the percentage is like nerfed, and so for a long period of time it's gonna be almost the same thing till the HP eventually outscales, right, the flat values. Again, like the Q damage can cause him some issues. Sometimes people just die exactly with your last finishing Q, and people will have more space to sort of escape or counterattack Cassante. Then the Q mana issues feel to be quite nice, so Cassante can spam his Q non-stop and get so many free trades in lane. And generally speaking, he'll maybe have a bit less mana to escape perhaps the enemy jungle in some rare case scenarios, I assume. Nafiri MC dog, I don't know what is this, he is getting nerfed, but Nafiri never been too strong. Maybe he's a bit annoying, I guess, for AD carries when she has like 2 items like Duskblade Prowlers, because then it's very hard to avoid her daggers because she's slowing with her basic attack, right? That's annoying, 100%, but they are nerfing what? Her passive, her unique passive, and E damage? Why? Why do you nerf for E damage? That affects her wave clear. If this affects her wave clear, it sucks, that's all I'm gonna say. But it's one of those like sort of playable mid lane lethality assassins. Jarvan, reasonable nerfs. I said it before that 2% passive nerf won't do much at most. He has a lot of utility in his kit, not only damage, so this will cut his late game DPS, which is definitely good. Which means that he has like less time to perma reapply also the armor pen, so he will have generally less DPS. Really good 6 nerfs at most. Q damage is less by 10 because he's terrorizing bot laners, mid laners as well to some degree, but mainly bot laners, right? So this is like a happy buff for bot laners. His W also has like more cooldown because turrets are getting buffed, right? And Ziggs eats towers alive, so he gets like a lot of gold value. That's why Ziggs has to be nerfed when tower gold value is buffed, right? Now his W got also good nerf, which means that generally speaking Ziggs can play less so much aggressively. It has the same cooldown right now as Elisandre because both of those abilities are used as an escape. So he will have less time to like permanently pressure. I mean, he will have less space to pressure overall, but later on it's gonna have the same cooldown, of course. But he will have less like space early on to like all the time pressure, which is definitely a good thing in my opinion. Which will usually allow more aggressive play into Ziggs, and he will have less poking power, of course. Then the W mana also costs more, so it hurts actually if you miss that W. Tower gold, of course. Uh, Visually, we can see local gold gonna be higher, minus 125 global gold from the tier 2 to red gold, right? Tier 3 tower gold, 325 local gold, minus 125 global gold, tooltips updated. So this patch is a bit whatever, but there are some things that are notable. Ziggs definitely deserves to be nerfed, a bit underrated in my opinion. Ziggs was super underrated by league player Jarvan. As I said before, that passive nerf won't do shit, so it still needs to be nerfed. Nafili, I don't know how to feel about this. Cassante, reasonable. Vel'Koz needs a buff, but not. This is not quite it in my opinion. Because often, like in lane, this won't give you too much pressure until you proc your passive, right? And it's kind of like if you just hit a Q, you want to poke maybe a W, but you don't proc your passive. This doesn't add too much like lane pressure to the table unless you actually fully commit, right? So you need to hit 3 abilities ideally, right? But, and I know you have 2 Ws, right? But what if one of them misses, right? You have another chance to hit another W, of course, but Q and E are generally hard to hit. So this is a bit of a cope buff, but this definitely feels to be decent. As I said, as I said before, just doing some rewind. Like it's definitely decent in all-ins, or if you can procure passive, but it's a bit of a cope buff. Trundle, same thing, cope buff. The issue with Trundle is not his base AD growth or his mana issue in top lane. Like it doesn't even have like that much amount of mana issues. I will still try the Trundle to see how he feels like, but I don't think so. This is it because he faces like bunch of different issues on top lane beside like his all-in power, right? Ribbon Q damage, Ribbon will be super strong in my opinion. Janna, super good changes. Draven a bit whatever. But yeah, I think this is my like overall opinion about this like patch. Maybe there will be more things, but this is what I found online. I think this is like a decent patch with some borderline useless changes that are a bit cope, because Ziggs will still be quite strong even after these nerfs, right? And Jarvan, definitely it's gonna affect him, but it still has so much utility in his kit. That's my thing, like, okay, you nerf his damage a bit, really good. But he still has so much utility in his kit, so I'm not sure if this will actually kill the champion, but definitely great nerf. But I don't think so, but should be nerfed again, honestly. At most it's like a okay patch, like there are some good points.